I want to speak offline about something, but if that's the recommendation, I'm good with it right now. And that's all I got.
All right, thank you.
Anything else related to PWRs? All right. Next topic is BI cleanup effort.
Thank you, Tony. So I just have one topic to go over with you all. We've started back up the BI cleanup effort. So any user that hasn't logged into BI in over a year, I will be sending those your way to review. We had to wait, if you remember, we had to wait after Sigma 4 was implemented. Everybody's date got pushed to the go live date. So it took a while to get back on track with that, but we're there now. I'm going to do it on a bi-monthly cadence. I think that works for now. You all have been very responsive and doing a good job with that, so the numbers are fairly low. And I think that's it. One easy way to get your people off that list, if they do still need BI access, is to just get them to simply log in, because that resets the counter and then they will not show up on my end. So that is a simple trick that is useful on both of our ends. So I would appreciate that. And I believe that's all I have, unless you have any questions on that topic.
So when you say log in, you mean just get into business intelligence, not actually log into Sigma, correct?
That is correct, Sean. Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. And I believe I'm turning it over to my friend Ashley.
Good morning, everyone. Before I start talking about monitoring stuff and your eyes all glaze over, let's all do a posture check, because if you're like me, you tend to, hunch over a lot, especially if you're on Excel sheets all the time. So feel free to stretch, especially if you're sitting down, and we'll talk about some monitoring stuff. So first thing I want to point out is we have our top 11 that is coming to an end August 31st. So if you have not gotten your survey response in, please do so as soon as possible, or you will be getting an email from me reminding you. And if you have any questions, if you're about the survey, or if you have any locking, like mass lock requests, you can contact me about that. I do recommend, though, if you haven't, excuse me, if you haven't opened up the survey yet, that is a great guide for getting through everything, is by going through each question and what to review. But again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. And I know there was recently some DTMB policy updates in regards to these type of reviews, but this review is going to be semi-annual going forward. And as included in this review now is budget user review. So I will be including budget users into the review from now on, January and July, for you guys to review. And then we're going to move on to some top 6 updates, or just clarification, especially for some of the newer ASAs. So for the top 6, we do have that twice a fiscal year sample. This is completely random. For whatever week you get the email for, it's completely randomly done in an Excel sheet, and the email will specify that it is a random sample that you have been selected for. This does require a response of acknowledgement if you do not perform bypasses and overrides, because I know some of the 900 departments are a little bit different. But for those who do perform bypasses and overrides in the system, I will need documentation of you tracking those for that random request. This is something that auditors will commonly ask us for, whether they're asking us for our stuff, or if they're looking at certain departments, they will specifically ask for these random sample responses along with your emails and what you respond with. So something to keep in mind. But on top of that, I also perform a weekly all department override and bypass review along with you guys. Mine's just all departments instead of just your guys' specific departments. So if there are any outliers above our expectations, I will start reaching out and asking for justification. This is not the random sample. It will make it very clear in the email. I will just be saying, hey, I'm reviewing last week's overrides and bypasses. I see these users under your department did blah, blah, blah. Do you guys have justification that you can give me that so I can put it in my review? The email format will be very obvious if it is the random sample or just me asking. And you can always ask to clarify too if you're unsure. This again is for like our own monitoring efforts and ensuring we are keeping up with overrides and bypasses that are being performed in the system. And I do highly encourage you to tell your users to add attachments or comments on these transactions that they are overriding or bypassing, because if I do see that, I will review them. And if I feel like it is sufficient enough of a reason why they did the override or the bypass, then I won't reach out about it. And this is also something that auditors ask for. So help me to help you by just letting me know what the justifications are. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the MISW 16 bypass report. So from our latest feature set in May, it has updated the classifications of bypasses in Sigma. For users that are submitting a transaction after it is bypassed in Sigma, it will identify the last person to submit as the person who bypassed. So I would very much reiterate to your users that they should be submitting a transaction and bypassing it, not bypassing and then submitting it. Because there will be instances that the system will also typically bypass like the GAX 9Rs, anything that's interfacing, and it will error out and users will go in and resubmit them, fix them, whatever they're doing. But because of this new reclassification, any user that's submitting a transaction like that will be classified as the bypasser for now. That's how it will show up in the bypass report. So this is something to keep an eye on when you're doing your own bypass reviews. But it's good to confirm because we want to know if the user is taking any actions on this, on these transactions, and if they're just bypassing them or are they fixing an error. So that's good to keep an eye on. And a good indicator for if a transaction was bypassed and then submitted is you'll see blanks in the approval role ID column in the report. And that is an indicator that, like I said, they bypassed and then submitted. And that's why I would highly encourage you to tell your users, please submit and then bypass. And I do have a few examples that I can show you guys just to, here we go. So if you were to run the report, you see here where I have it highlighted, this approval role ID. If this is populated, that means they submitted and then bypassed it. But if you see it's blank, that would indicate it was bypassed and then submitted. And then just a few examples of how that looks in Sigma. So this is an example of a timesheet that was bypassed. You can see here, I pointed out this little final area where it's kind of blue. It's like a link that will take you to that track work in progress. If it's like that, then that means it was submitted and then bypassed. And you'll also see if it's done in that order as well. If you go to that track work in progress, we see this approval role path showing up. We see who's bypassed it. It will say here, I just blanked all this out for, privacy purposes, and it'll show us who the submitter of the transaction is. And if you scroll down a little on that screen, you'll see here that this is the new reclassification within Sigma as well. It points out the user ID of the person who bypassed, and it says status before was pending, status after bypassed. So that is an example one that was submitted and bypassed. Now this one is an example of one that was bypassed and then submitted. So once again, you'll see up here, this little final area, it is black. It is not a link anymore because of that. So you can't click it to go into track work in progress. You would have to do that 3-dot menu and then do track work in progress. And if we go to the track work in progress, we can see the date submitted and the submitter part is all blank. We don't see that approval role path because of that, because it technically never went into it because it was bypassed first. And then this new reclassification down here, it still says which user bypassed it, but we can see the status before says draft instead of pending. But it still says status after is bypassed. And then just an example as well of those more interface-based ones. We can see like this GAX9R, it was created by an interface account. And for these instances, they do, because the interface accounts just bypassed, they will typically have this final is going to be black. It's not going to be that link like for the track work in progress page. You'd have to go to the 3-dot menu to do that. And when we go into the track work in progress, we can see the same thing here. These are blank. There's no approval role or approval path. And the user ID is the interface account, along with that status before, draft, status after, bypass. Now, this is an example of someone who, or of a transaction. It was created by an interface account. But when we check out, same thing, it's, final is black. We can't use the link. And we go in here, it's all blanked out. But in this case, a user submitted this GAX9R. So since they were the last submitter, this user ID is now what is being classified as the bypasser. And we see that status before is draft, status after is bypassed. So that's just example of what you're going to see and why it's really a good idea to reach out to users and just make sure, did they just submit it or did they make changes and then bypass it? But I definitely, like I said, encourage you guys to let them know. And these interface ones are a little different, but like for timesheets and stuff like that, submit and then bypass just to avoid that. Any questions on that really quick before I move on? I know I kind of threw a lot at you with that. Okay, I'll take silence as no questions. All right, and then moving on from that. So department change monitoring by departments. So our team does not know when different agency users are changing from one department to another ahead of time. Our report that we run daily that picks up department changes only picks it up once the EPM page updates in Sigma, which is coming from Herman, but it takes a few days for us to see that change as well. So if there's a worry about foreign org access, you will need to ensure that you are reviewing department changes upcoming regularly to ensure that you can remove the old access before the department change happens. We do have the monthly foreign org report that we use as kind of like a backup for you guys to catch those instances. And we do also keep track of the users that have changed departments and still have old department security. And we give you guys time to update because I know it takes time to figure out UDoc wise, like what you want for their security. And we'll usually reach out within like 1 to 2 weeks if we notice the old stuff hasn't been removed, just to make sure that if they do need it removed, I know there's some foreign org exceptions. But you can always reach out to us for assistance in either manually updating the department on the user page so that you can do a UDoc if they do transfer over and you have some issues like submitting a UDoc because it's not in your department anymore. So we can work with old department and new department to get that going. But just so you know, it's better if you can do it ahead of time. And then the final thing that I want to go over is we would like to present a new procedure that we'd like to maybe start around fiscal year 26 for agency user unlock requests to be directed towards ASAs from our Sigma security mailbox and our collective help desk and callers. As you all have the ability to submit UDocs, and those you can use the UDocs to unlock users. And these UDocs would only require agency approval to have the unlock go through. You would not need to go through Sigma security for just an unlock. This would be beneficial to you guys as when it comes to like the semi-annual top 11, you'd have a better idea of what users should be active in the system, and it wouldn't take as much time reviewing. For users that we don't know that shouldn't be unlocked, whether they're on a specific leave or workers comp or they shouldn't be changing their timesheets and all that, it would be great so that we're not unlocking people we're not supposed to. And it would be great for auditing purposes as well, since the UDOC would show that documentation of the process. Because just stat-wise, from what the EUS side of Sigma deals with, in our Sigma security mailbox tracking worksheet, we had 666 unlocks since the beginning of the fiscal year. Our Sigma help desk has had 884, and then Cheryl Blondie specifically had 681 herself, giving us a grand total of 2,231 agency user unlocks so far for the year of the fiscal year 25. So we would like to see if we can maybe push that forward to the departments to review. And if there is an error that's more than an unlock, you can forward us the email and we can look at it and fix any other things, like any username issues. If an HR doc is required, we'd need to do that. But any of us at Sigma Security, our ESS help desk or our Sigma help desk can deal with that. But any questions about anything? Any of those?
We are the ones that kind of asked for the ability. So are you saying now all ASAs get to unlock their own people?
I mean, you had the ability to do that before, but yes, we would like to start directing those requests towards ASAs in general.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much for, doing that, because I didn't know. And we would have much rather preferred all our unlocks come to us, but thank you for letting us finally be able to do that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, anyone with UDOC capabilities is able to do that. If there's nothing else, I will turn it over. I don't know who's next, but I will turn it over to them.
All right, thanks, Ashley. The next topic is foreign agency access requests. I just wanted to reiterate or remind people three important factors when it comes to obtaining foreign agency access. One is, let's communicate, and let's try to communicate timely, whether it's responding with an approval or responding with follow-up questions, get more information. Please try to do that as soon as possible, because in some cases, depending on which agency or what security roles are being requested, some of that is time sensitive, because some roles, for example, within Sigma operations and support, we have one security role that provides access to all state departments, and we need to obtain approval from especially the special agencies. So we need to get that as soon as possible, so our new people actually have the ability to log into Sigma and perform their responsibilities. Also within the request, it's a reminder to basically highlight what is being requested and why do they need that. That really helps the reviewer understand the nature of it and also help minimize any of the follow-up questions. I do have some examples, and it doesn't have to be a long novel by any means. It can just be short and sweet. For example, here in this, they're listing the security roles that they would like to assign. And in this little statement down here, they're simply stating how that user is going to be or why that user needs these security roles. This was an example of a recent item that was sent out, but even though this was for a central agency, same type of logic applies if you're, say, at DHHS and you're requesting access for, let's say, a treasury role for some reason. State the particular treasury role that you're requesting and also provide the reason why that person needs the role. And sometimes we see on UDOCs that Jane Smith is replacing John Doe, and that's why they're requesting the role. But I'll be honest, if when that comes across to my team, I will be sending a follow-up asking for more information because I really didn't know what John Doe did, and I don't know why Jane Smith needs it. So if you can just include that on there, it just helps things go a lot more smoothly. Gwendolyn?
So Tony, if it's a temporary request for someone who's temporary backfilling someone until an FTE can be filled, do you want the start and end dates for the time frame posted in that email as well, or do you want two separate requests?
I guess I don't know if that would be two separate requests. I mean, if you know it's going to be temporary and you have an idea on those dates, it'd be
Mm-hmm.
nice to just include that information if it's already known up front.
Okay.
But again, the agency that owns the data, though, I can't speak for them, but I just know generally speaking that they would definitely want to know what's being requested and why do they need it. But
Okay.
if you have the temporary date range, I'm sure that would be beneficial for them as well.
Okay.
Any other questions related to foreign agency access? All right, I'll turn it over to business role assignments.
Hi guys, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I kind of just wanted to touch base with business role business roles when adding security roles on UDocs. I have come across a few UDoc initiators had submitted UDocs with adding new security roles to a user, but there were no business roles except the employee business role. So I just kind of wanted to just touch base with this. I know most of our ASAs already know this, but I kind of just maybe if we could just remind our UDoc initiators whenever they are adding any type of security roles, just to make sure that on that fourth tab, the business role tabs, that they're also adding business roles needed for those security roles. And I know you guys have seen this as well, but I just kind of wanted to pull it up again, which this is on our SharePoint site, the security role to business role crosswalk. On our first tab, we have our business role descriptions. So if you wanted more information about those business roles, the description, primary application, target group, and so on, this is where you can find it. For an example, timekeeper right here. We have description of review timesheets submitted by specific units after the manager approval, and then which application it's primarily used in. And then tab 2, our security role to business role crosswalk. Now, if you're not sure which business role a security role may need, this is where you can find that information. And we have all of our roles, standard roles on here. And we suggest using filters to search. For an example, if we have a UDoc initiator we're adding to someone and you're not sure which business role, that's going to need the agency security business role. Or if you're adding a timekeeper security role to someone and you're not sure which business role that will be, that'll be the timekeeper business role. And then I kind of just had this example of this UDoc pulled up for one of my test accounts. This UDoc is adding a timekeeper role and a UDoc initiator role. So over here, we have the timekeeper security role as well as the agency security business role. And then all employees will have their employee business role already. But I kind of just wanted to point that out as a reminder to our UDoc initiators whenever they're being trained or anything like that, or when you're reviewing UDocs, just kind of keep in mind to double check that business role tab. Do we have any questions regarding this? And if not, that's pretty much all I just wanted to point out.
All right, so if there are no questions, let me see if I can transition this slideshow correctly. So just bear with me for 1 second. All right. So let's see. All right, so if you can see a PowerPoint, uh, can you either give a thumbs up or react in some way?
We can see it, Chris.
All right. All right, so if you grew up as a kid in the 90s, whenever you see this symbol, you probably think in your head, where in the world did all of my Sigma roles go? Or something similar to that. Maybe that's not quite the right tune, but something like that. So this is just a short presentation on why you might see some of your Sigma roles kind of disappear, what it looks like when they're missing, and of course then how to kind of track them down and find them. Here. All right, so one of my favorite parts of that show was all the punny names, but it turns out it's kind of hard to come up with a pun for VPN. So I went with Victor Patrick No Name. So a VPN issue most likely will present itself as under your user's name. There's going to be only like manager and employee showing, whereas all these other roles, even though they are assigned, won't appear if you're not connected to the VPN itself. So no name, think of your name, nothing under your name. It kind of works. It's a stretch. But anyway, so if you have a user saying, hey, I can't get to any of my business roles except for manager and employee, it's most likely the best approach to this is to ask them if they're connected to the VPN. And if they're not, have them connect in, because while you could access your manager and employee roles outside of a VPN, none of the others will allow you to access the system in that way. And so just by asking that one question instead of sending us an email at that point, sometimes we can like head off the problem early on in the process. So kind of like Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. It's not only you can prevent this, but this presentation is basically you have these tools available to you to kind of prevent those fires from spreading into larger ones. So next we have the Scoozer twins. So this is dealing with the SE user page and basically these twin issues of security roles and workflow roles. And so they're separate because they are two separate things. So security is going to deal with all your users' accesses to the system and actions they can take on transactions. And then workflow is their ability to kind of see those transactions throughout the approval process and make the approval when it comes time to. So on the SE user page, these menus will come up. So you know it's the security roles if it says assign security role to user here, whereas the workflow roles are going to look like assign roles to an approver. And so why these would be important is because you can't really know what's missing until you know what you have. And so this is a good place to start if you get a report from a user that, hey, I'm not able to do this thing I could do like 2 weeks ago, or I can't see a transaction in the workflow process. So where to look on the SE user page itself. So if you search for your user ID in this 3-dot menu, there's going to be these options that pop up. So this big arrow here is pointing to the assign security role to user. and that's going to be where your security role assignments for the user are going to be found. If in this menu under Manage Approvers, you kind of pull up this side menu here, then you can see the assigned roles. That's going to be the workflow roles that the user has. So in this way, you can kind of investigate what they have to try and deduce what's wrong. So some of the reasons you may need to take a look at SC user page. So the reasons are going to vary depending on if it's a workflow role issue or a security role issue. So again, for security roles, these are taking actions on a transaction. So I hit approve and it said not authorized, or I hit submit and it said not authorized. These are going to be indications that perhaps the user doesn't have the correct security roles assigned to them in the system. Or alternatively, you could get an objects and fields not authorized for users assigned security organizations. So this deals with foreign orgs. So a lot of times when we see this, it is a security role issue, but the underlying cause is that there's a field in the transaction that has a represented department that the user doesn't have access to. And so in this case, that would be a missing security role authorizing access to that particular department for the user. Alternatively, you could have workflow role issues. Some of these would be like if you hit approve and it said user not assigned to the current approval level. So this might be a case where you have a certain approval level of like the workflow role assigned, and that transaction that you're trying to approve isn't actually at that level yet. Maybe it's at the one before it, or it just hasn't quite got you yet. But this would be a case where most likely it's not a missing role, but that transaction isn't ready for this user's approval yet. And if it is ready for the user's approval, then it would be a case that they don't have the proper workflow role assigned for that approval step. Another one that sometimes comes up we've seen is people only being able to see their personal work list and the work list widget on a business role homepage. And so this is a case where that widget is going to be an accumulation of all your workflow roles assigned in the system. And so included in that is your personal work list. If a user doesn't have any workflow roles assigned, that's all they'll see. So in this case, if this comes up, usually it's the case of the user either didn't get any workflow roles assigned in their original assignment UDoc, or something's happened in the system that's taken those away and they need to be reassigned. All right, so Harvey track or his track. So we're talking about the his track page. So this is a historical tracking of assignments. And so if you have the user ID of the user in question, you can search under assignee on this page, and then it will show you all the assignments that that user gets in the system. So we have this from column, and that's going to be the starting date. So this is going to show you when the different roles were assigned. We have the to column. This is going to show you if any roles have been removed or they stopped having that role assigned. Then it'll show you the date that that removal or unassignment took place. And so what I like to do is I kind of like to sort it by this to column, because really in most cases when we're looking at like something changing seemingly overnight from I used to be able to do X and now I can't do X the following day, we're usually looking at something changing with a role, so it being either removed or taken away for some reason. So if we sort by the to column, then after all the roles that haven't been removed, because they're not going to have entries here, but if we scroll down, we'll see the most recent time that a role was removed for that user. And if this happens to be like 2 days ago or yesterday, then most likely you found the culprit of why that user has experienced a difference in their ability to take actions or approve transactions in the system. And this will show you security roles so that you see the SC user link, role link, and it will also show you workflow roles. So you have the WF user role. So that would be a workflow role changing assignments. So just a good thing to look at if you notice that there's been a sudden change in the user's access or ability. So next we have April location or an application issue. So this screenshot, if you've ever seen this before, this is most likely caused by the user not having access to a particular application. So these widgets are all application based. And so if a user has the financial management business role, as in this case, and this widget on that is for the Fin application. If the user doesn't have that Fin application checked, they're going to see something like this because they don't have that access. It's the same way that if you were assigned a Fin role and then you went to a Fin page, if you didn't have the application checked, it would say not authorized because you can't access that application in the system. And so this is just, it doesn't happen all the time, but if you ever see something like this, or you notice like, hey, every time I go to these Fin pages, I get a not authorized, even though I have the roles. On SC user page, you can take a look and see if they have all the applications that they should checked. And if they need them checked, then you can submit a UDoc, assign that application, and then this should display and they should be able to access the correct pages. All right, so very intelligent, or BI. I think that's my favorite pun. But anyway, so we're using business intelligence to kind of take a look at the transactions that have been submitted in the system for a particular user. So similar to the HisTrack page, we can kind of use business intelligence to kind of come up with like a report to show us all the different transactions that would have changed the user security in the system. So this is going to show us the HR docs and the U docs. And so if you're not too familiar, this is available as a report. It's this SW19 report, so UDoc audit trail. So just try and remember 19 or UDoc audit trail. But when this comes up, you're going to hit this query to pop up this menu. And then you can just put in your user ID here. And then down at the bottom, you hit run. And then it will show you results in the cover page, but I like to use this data results header tab here, so you can just tab over in the results. And basically the useful part of this is going to be these transaction ID and transaction last date columns. So this is chronological usually. I'm not sure why this is an exception to that, but usually you can just follow along here, get down to the end, the most recent time a transaction affected the user security in the system. And so knowing that, we can then get the transaction ID. And then this will allow us to go into the system with that transaction ID and take a look at the actual transaction, because sometimes it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes people will just submit security roles and no workflow roles. And that's an easy mistake to make. But in this way, we can determine, is that what happened? Or is there a case where something in the system removed roles for a reason? And so by looking at the transaction that had the effect on the user, we can better learn about the reason why that took place. And if there's issues, we can address it. We can always add back missing roles. That's not a problem. But just wanted to give everyone a little introductory version into like using the BI report to kind of do that math and research for you, so you don't have to feel like you're digging through thousands of UDocs for one transaction. All right. And so is there any questions on any of the slides in this quick little presentation? All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. And then I think Sam is going to take you guys through a little bit on the budget security form.
Okay, so I'm just going to do just a quick review of some of the required fields on the budget form. So you can get to the blank form on the SharePoint site. And with that, there are a few of the fields that we need to have filled out in a certain way. So with the approvals, I'm sorry, with the first section here, if you're adding a new user, you check add, modify, if you're just modifying user. So this includes if they transferred from a different department and they already had BI, or I'm sorry, BI budget, you just click modify and then you can both add and remove their previous security on the form. And then down at the bottom with the signatures, the requester is always going to be the user that we're creating or modifying the budget profile for. And then the supervisor is their supervisor. And then the ASA signature down here. For the state budget office approval, typically when you forward us this form, we obtain that. And these two fields here are a little different. So the human resource director is only required when this role here, the budget form instances SBFS, is checked. And the civil service approval is only required when role is checked, as well as multiple security organizations. So that would be here. So that would be the departments. So if there's multiple departments or organizations or something like that here, that's when we would need those additional approvals. And then this section here under security organizations, the public and non-IT requests, this is just the default that every department user will get. So that will need to be checked. And that's the same here with the all appropriations. It's not required that they have access to all appropriations, but that's typically what's recommended just because it can have impact on reports if they just have specific appropriation categories selected. So if you don't have any specific categories that you only want them to have access to, you just want all appropriations for the department, make sure this one here is checked. And I think that's all for the form. Oh, sorry, one more thing. With the workflow groups, they can only be assigned one workflow group so at a time. So if they needed multiple workflow groups or you needed to change it, that would just be another form to modify their access. And when you are modifying, we would like their current access or their most recent access to be on the form, and then you can document what you're adding or removing here in the summary of request. If it's a new user, we'd also need this section here, the summary of request, filled out, just so we have the reason when SBO is approving their access. And there is more detailed information about how to fill out the form on this PowerPoint here, which is also on the SharePoint site. And when you have the form and you need to modify or create a new user, and you also need to create the UDoc or have us create the UDoc to provide the access. Typically, when we create the profile, we offer to do that for you. But if you're creating the UDoc, you want to make sure that you're checking the budget application, as well as adding the BIPBU security role if they need access to BI, and then the budget business role. And again, if you are creating the UDoc to assign those things, if they have not had their profile created yet, just make sure the approved form is attached to the UDoc so we can get that created. And I think that covers everything I had. Are there any questions about budget?
Hello, Samantha. This is Sean Stevens again. So for before we did, because we have some people that only need the budget business intelligence, and there used to be a form for just the business intelligence, and then we were told to do the regular form that you just demonstrated. So which would you rather have us, which form are we supposed to use? The one you just demonstrated, or the form that was just created for business intelligence?
So ideally for department users, we'd like them to use this form. I know what one you're talking about, and I believe that one is just for specific reports. Is that correct? Is my thinking of the right form?
Yes, well, yes, because we have just our reports team that don't go into budget. They just do the business intelligence or run the business, get the information from business intelligence budget.
Okay, I see. Okay, yep, that form, yes, that form is correct if you were just asking just for the BI access and not access to budget.
Okay, so do you, so I guess what I'm, so we can use the one just for business intelligence or just okay,
Yep, that's fine.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you. And one of the things that I noticed in the chat, there was a question, I apologize that I saw it late, is in regard for some information on how to unlock users. And I will just go ahead and show a quick way of doing it through a UDoc. They go into our test environment. This page should look familiar to most of you. This is the view that you get with the agency security business role. Go on to the UDoc link. Go ahead and create transaction. Bring up the user. Then populate from existing user so it brings up all the information. If the user was locked, this would be shown as locked. But what you can do to unlock them is just simply open up this drop-down menu and select active. Then you can just validate and then submit it, and then it'll just go through workflow.
I will add really quick, if a user is in a disabled status, that will require an HR doc, and you will need to reach out to Sigma Security for those instances.
And then, as you can
Well,
see,
sorry, Ashley, but couldn't you just do a UDoc and put as active and put the employee in the business role back in? Because that's what we do.
You can, but unless we check if they are linked to their user ID
Yeah.
so that they can do their timesheet. So
Correct.
if they were like in a terminated status and came back, sometimes it doesn't link them back to that user ID. So
Okay.
a HR doc is required or they'll get an error when they try to submit a timesheet.
But as long as they're active in the EPM and the Sigma HRM, it's okay for them, for us just mark active again, isn't it? Because that's what we've been doing, as long as they're active in Sigma HRM.
I would just say if they're in a disabled status, I would reach out to us just so we can check that they're connected to their user ID. Because otherwise they'll get an error when they try to do a timesheet and you'll be reaching out to us anyway.
Well, not necessarily. If they're, I'd rather just for MDHHS employees come to us if they're disabled, because we know what to do.
before I open this up for questions from ASA, is something that I just realized that we didn't include on here that I just wanted to touch base on, is I just wanted to remind all the ASAs that late last week we sent out email to all of you just sharing or giving you a heads up about a patch that will be going into our production environment on September 6th, I believe it is. And basically that patch that's going in is just helping with the restoration of the unit level security. And that primarily impacts timekeepers. It could impact procurement a little bit, but predominantly it could impact timekeepers. We don't think that would be a lot of work for any of the ASAs because ASAs have been really good at assigning unit level security roles to the users for the units that they're responsible for doing timekeeping duties for. So, but there could be a handful of people that had a unit level timekeeper security role, but in fact that they were doing approvals on another unit like it was expected to be, but they just didn't have that appropriate security role. They, in some cases, were able to go in and review and approve those timesheets. We're not aware of any circumstances where something like that was happening, but nonetheless, there was a defect that CGI corrected for us. So we got that corrected, or we're implementing that patch to help restore. Are there any questions related to that? Thank you. And then the next on our agenda is just any questions from the ASAs in general.
I've got a question, circling back to the top 0006 process. I understand the twice a year random request, but the weekly checks that go out to or potentially go out to individuals, how is that? What's the threshold for sending those out to end users who are doing the bypass or overrides? Does it align with the each department semi-annual risk assessment, or is that something specific to statewide thresholds?
Do you mean what expectation am I looking at for that? Is that what you mean, David?
Yeah, I mean, what you
Uh,
what you may be looking at for those weekly ones might not meet the threshold that the departments are doing on their own because of that semi-annual risk assessment that they're for when they send those out for review and justification.
Yes, that's based off of I do a monthly one that has formulas that adjust every month based on how many each month takes the whole year, and then fills out an expectation per week from that. So that's what it is our own formula that I'm going off of for that. So I
Okay.
understand it's not maybe going to line up with yours, but it's just an overall look at the department and transaction for the whole fiscal year.
And that changes monthly.
Yes, as I update it monthly, it will change depending on
Okay.
numbers.
That potentially causes audit issues if the ASAs are not looped into that communication that they have on their end, because we may not send out for review something because your threshold changed from 1 month to the month, and ours is based on our 6-month assessment.
Okay, yep, I can make sure, like I told you before, make sure to loop you in on those so that we're all on the same page.
Are you able to publish those changes to us, or
The expectations?
when you rerun that monthly, so that we have a trigger of now you're going to be looking at this threshold for an override on a transaction where it was not looked at before the previous month?
Well, maybe we can talk about this
Okay.
offline.
Yeah, I
'Cause
mean,
yeah.
it's a rolling total, David. So it's, if you say that you did 10 over this time and that's okay, then we're gonna adjust in our roll up for the next monthly one, we're gonna say, okay, MDOT's doing more now, so that's okay, and we're not gonna be bothering you because
Well,
it's part of your business now.
But the issue becomes when we're not doing it and you're asking for it because you're expecting that your threshold is lower.
I mean, it doesn't fall off that much, does it, Ashley?
No, it's just been mainly with this new reclassification. It's been those new transactions that have been showing up because of the submitting, an interface account. So that's what I've been mostly reaching out lately on. So it doesn't change that much.
Is that the interface account? Is that what you were just describing before?
No.
Because of the process in which it was submitted and bypassed, that's why those got triggered.
Yeah, because of that new reclassification, new transactions have been showing up that users will submit because of that error out. So that's what I've been reaching out on recently, just to clarify that that's what's happening. So that's the main thing I've been reaching out on. Otherwise, you guys haven't. It's been not much more.
Okay.
But we can discuss more offline if you want to see more of it. I can show you the expectations and what I look at.
Okay, thanks.
Jody?
I think I just wanted to touch on that because I think we set our own threshold, correct? And then your threshold on your end was becoming higher because of those interfaces and the weird order that they were submitted, correct?
Correct.
Our thresholds are still
that's
our
helping
thresholds.
us figure out the issue too.
Gotcha. Okay.
As we work through it. So
really nothing's changing on our end. You're seeing those higher numbers and you're asking questions.
Yes,
yeah, just trying to understand, and we can route those through the ASAs too if you don't want us going straight to end users. But
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
And one thing that I just wanted to add, and Kyle, Ashley, please forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't want ASAs to think that we're changing our methodology. I know with the discussion that David had with us on it, it seems like it's like a revolving door. Everything's changing. Our methodology has remained the same, and as Ashley indicated, it is formula based, but that formula is based on actual data that comes in on a monthly basis. So that kind of changes the average or the threshold that's used to kind of like flag things for us to follow up on. And so that's why it sounds like things are changing. Numbers, it is, but our methodology has remained constant. And when we do see the fluctuations, that's where we send out questions just to follow up, because that's just one of the things that we're required to do. And we know that agencies may have their own separate methodologies that could even be more detailed than ours. So that's
Yeah, I mean, part of the question is because the topic itself does not indicate that Sigma Central Security is going to be reaching out to individual users for this information. None of the ones that I've spoken with on our side anyways have ever seen a request like this before. So that's when I say it's new in that sense, not that you guys have changed what you're doing on a weekly basis, but our users are not aware of that changing and are only used to our existing processes where we send it out and it's sent for review based on the thresholds that we know what they are, not thresholds that now I understand you guys are updating monthly on your side. So that could add more reviews on our side.
We've been doing the monthly for a while now, so that isn't new either, but I was reaching out to users, like I said, because of that new reclassification, because I was trying to figure out what was going on. So that's when I started kind of reaching out to agency users to get clarification from them. But, I can make sure. I know you guys requested reaching out to you, and that's fine. I'm fine reaching out to you about that and including all ASAs on that stuff, but that's kind of where it started, and just making sure that what was going on with that reclassification so that I could explain it to auditors and anyone else who asked.
Yeah. Okay. Just for my knowledge, the reclassification that you're talking about, what is that related to?
that review that I went over, the bypass review, that the last submitter is going to be, named as the bypasser because of that new feature set reclassification. So that's what I was saying with like those interface based transactions that typically are bypassed by the interface, but if it errors out and then a user goes in and manually either change something or resubmits it, that's where they'll be classified as the bypasser. So that's why I started reaching out just to clarify what their actions were.
Okay.
So that I could figure that out. Yep.
Are there any other questions?
I guess since nobody's speaking up, I'll ask this just because it's a recent thing that sounds like it may not happen often. But to me, I don't know if it's something that should have a PWR put in for or not. But someone on leave returned to leave, and when they were put back in an active status, their timekeeping rule was removed, but their other security permissions were remained. Is that a known issue that's being looked into, or should that be a PWR?
Yeah, I also know, we have also noticed that there was a timekeeper workflow removed, and we never did a UDAC to remove it. I don't know if that was a glitch or somebody, somebody else had the same issue. But we had like 2 people that were missing the timekeeper workflow, and we didn't do a UDOC to do it, so.
These are folks that are going off on leave and then coming back.
Yeah, but in MDOT's case, the role wasn't removed until they came back, not when they left.
That's interesting. We do have an issue with HR docs that we're working on. For whatever reason in the mapping, it started picking up people going into L status and disabling them as if they were terminated. So I think that might be related to what you guys are talking about.
We've had the same issue at DTMB as well when we've we've locked users, and when we've gone in, when we know they've returned, we've gone in and they are actually disabled and workflow roles were removed. But the security roles were there. So yeah. So we've had the same issue.
Definitely an issue. Ashley actually picked up on that the other day. So we think we've got a fix, so hopefully not too much longer with that. If Sean and David, if you think that's something separate though, you can always feel free to send us whoever that user was, and we can dig in to see if we can't figure out what's going on. But I'm kind of hoping that that's related to that HR doc issue, which again, I'm hoping we can get that fixed pretty quick.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if any of you are aware of like a potential issue or defect like David and others just shared with users on leave mysteriously losing roles, obviously that sounds more like an issue. Please feel free to just email Sigma Security and report that to us. Things like that are not a PWR type item. That's just simply sharing information with us that we may not be aware of. Because I know we work closely with team members on Sigma and operations and support, but obviously we're not working as closely with the department end users like all of you are doing. So we may not be aware of some of those little things.
Yes, absolutely.
Anything else? All right, everybody. Thank you for your time. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to sigmasecurity@michigan.gov.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.